All right, so today we're going to continue in the teaching on honor and shame. This is part 2. Okay, part 2. I'm not going to take that much time in the setting it back up. Just remember that the word honor had an awful lot of context to it. It had to do with respect, high respect, great esteem, admiration, having a good reputation, to do what is required, having a keen sense of ethical conduct. There was all kinds of aspects that we're going to bring out as we go through. But the main point is this. The difference between honor and shame was that honor was this desire to receive this distinction, being considered approved in the Father's eyes, that this is doing what's honorable or receiving honor from above, etc., the esteem. And shame was the painful feeling of humiliation, which you should feel when you do something that's shame or distress caused by the consciousness of a wrong, a loss of respect or esteem. That's what shame is. If you do something that causes you to lose respect or esteem, dishonor, okay? So that's really the important thing here. Now, as we study this, we're going to come to understand, and we're looking at here, is Yeshua is going to be talking about how he does things to receive honor and esteem of the Father, and we're going to see a connection that by in like manner, we will be receiving honor and esteem from the Father. Is that clear? Do we understand that? So we're going to be looking at it, and this is a big contextual thing. We're going to read it quite a bit to make sure we understand the context of when he mentions about receiving esteem from men or receiving esteem from above, he's doing it after something was already either happening or talked about, and there's a connection there. And so we're going to connect those dots together as we read through today the book of John quite a bit, okay? Now, so let's go to John chapter 5. That was my little quick reset there. John chapter 5, I'm going to begin in verse 10. No, actually, we're going to begin in verse 1. I'm going to read most of this chapter here, but the verse we're going to get to, the situation is in verse 10 and 11. We're going to see some things going on, and then again in verse 24 and 41, etc. Let's begin in verse 1. Okay? Actually, you know what? We'll begin in verse 41. I just want you to see where we're going. So we're going to this phrase in verse 41 where Yeshua says, I do not receive esteem from men. Okay, esteem is a respect and admiration combination, and honor, that's a high. So it's adding honor and admiration together. Okay? He says, I do not receive esteem from men, but I know you that you do not have the love of Elohim in you, etc. So we're going to try to understand, why is he saying this phrase about us receiving honor from men? We're going to have to begin in chapter 5, verse 1 to go through a whole lot of stuff to get there. So after this, there was a festival of the Yehudim, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem, up to Yerushalayim. And in Yerushalayim at the sheep gate, there is a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethzatha, having 5 porches. And in these were lying a great number of those who were sick, blind, crippled, paralyzed, waiting for the stirring of the water. For a messenger was going down at a certain time into the pool and was stirring the water. Whoever stepped in first then, after the stirring of the water, became well of whatever disease he had. And a certain man was there who had a sickness 38 years. When Yeshua saw him lying there, and knowing that he already had been a long time, he said to him, do you wish to become well? The sick man answered him, saying, Master, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred, but while I am coming, another steps down before I get there, before me. And Yeshua said to him, Rise, take up your bed and walk. You don't have to wait for the waters. And immediately the man became well, took up his bed, and was walking. Now the bed was not really a bed, like a pallet, okay, just a thin mattress that he was able to take with him, something he could roll up and carry with him. He said, and immediately the man became well, and he took up his bed and was walking, and now it was Shabbat on that day. It was the Sabbath day. And the Yehudim therefore said to him who had been healed, it is Shabbat. It's not right for you to take up the bed. And he answered them and said, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. He's like, who am I to argue? The guy who made me well told me to take up my bed and walk. I thought it probably a pretty good idea to listen to him. He said, therefore they asked him, who is this man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Yeshua had moved away, and a crowd being in that place, he didn't know where he went to. He hadn't seen him. This man said, go and do these things, and then Yeshua sort of just went through the crowds and disappeared. Afterward, Yeshua found him in the set-apart place and said to him, see, you have been made well, sin no more, so that no worse matter befalls you. The man went away and told the Yehudim that it was Yeshua who made him well. So Yeshua shows up, they have a little conversation, and we're finding out that there may have been a sin connection to this man's particular affliction. He says, go and sin no more. In other words, learn the lessons from this. I healed you, I restored you, but there's a purpose to it. And by the way, let's take that purpose into what we've been talking about over months and months and months. The difference between the way Christianity understands Torah being done away with, etc., nailed to the cross, whatever they say. He said, look, I removed your curse, I healed you, so that you could go forward and not sin. Not, I healed you, removed your curse, so that you can go forward and do whatever you want. Not that you could just go forward and continue to sin. But without the law, there's no knowledge of sin. It's by the law that we know what is sin. It defines sin. If you don't know what right and wrong is, then how do you know whenever you're doing anything that's wrong? You need something to tell you this is right, this is wrong. So he's saying here, look, I healed you, I restored you. He found him, he said, look, you've been made well. So now go forward and stop doing the dumb things you've been doing. Work on it. He's not expecting him to be perfect right that minute. He said, walk out the Deuteronomy 8, thing, the idea of with integrity, showing that it's in your heart, Deuteronomy 8:2, to do the law, to keep the commandments, to be submissive to the authority of Elohim in your life. He may have had a struggle in, that particular area right there, his submission to Elohim. After all, rather than going to Elohim, he was hoping for the magic of some angel or entity stirring up waters. He wasn't going just for any kind of prayer for healing or any other thing. He was waiting for the magical moment to heal him. He wasn't going to change anything in his life. In other words, he was looking for the magic wand, and Yeshua finds him in the set-apart place. I wonder if Yeshua was looking for him. He said, I want to just see where you're at. He said, by the way, I didn't do all of this just so that you can continue doing whatever you were doing. I did this so you can come out from sin and make changes in your life. And then the man, obviously having this conversation with Yeshua, now knew, and the man went away and told the Jews, the Yehudim, that it was Yeshua who made him well. And because of this, the Yehudim persecuted Yeshua and were seeking to kill him. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise to us. We see the emotionalism in today's society. We see emotionalism in societies in the past, where when people are out there in a strong and public way doing that which we are so violently against for whatever reason, we really seek to persecute and destroy them or kill them. You see this happening right now in politics in America. We see this happening in politics in other countries throughout the centuries. You see this happening culturally, where one culture wants to kill another culture over whatever it is they disagree about. He says, so here, because he did what? He healed a person. Oh my God, how horrible. Now, they thought it was sin to do so. I get that. But it's not like he did anything that was so horrible. They were just like, they could point out to people, hey, listen, you shouldn't do what he just did. But they're persecuting him and wanting to kill him because that's really not the issue. Just like it's never the issue culturally when one culture is attacking another culture or whatever, or politics or whatever it is, it's not about the issue. It's about what's behind the issue, which is almost always power. Yeshua was threatening their power because, after all, if he was healing people and getting a reputation for it and doing these things that were not in line with the current power structure, it may undermine the current power structure's authority with the people. So they needed to eliminate him. And so he was seeking to kill him because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. And it's not because he was doing them on the Sabbath, but because they taught against it and he was doing it, and therefore that was going to undermine their authority. So this is all about authority here. Again, think about the whole teaching now was about what? Honor and shame. They felt like he was causing them to lose honor because he was now going to receive honor because he was doing on Shabbat, which they said not to do, and then miracles were happening and people were giving him honor. And then they were losing honor. See, we don't understand this so much because in our society, we don't have a sort of a measuring stick of measuring one's honor versus someone else's honor. But there are cultures throughout history that was very important, where it was always about looking at the level of honor your family had versus another family's, your country had versus another country's. But we've lost all that, caring about that. But you can see here, it could also cause a problem when it's too much the other way. They, with their measuring stick, perceived that he was receiving honor that belonged to them. Therefore, he needed to be killed. They had to get rid of him. Because after all, he was now going to receive honor that they believed was meant for them. But Yeshua answered them. So here it is. They're seeking after him, and apparently Yeshua's there. When some of this is going on, the man is explaining to them. He went away and told the Yehudim what was going on. And Yeshua's right there, and he answered saying, my Father works now, until now, and I work. He said, my Father works. Okay, so this is one of those things that, again, mainstream Christianity needs to be paying attention to, the idea of works. Oh, works are so horrible. I don't know, Yeshua's defending them here. He said, my Father works, and I work. And we're supposed to follow him. And so we're to work. He says, because of this, then, the Yehudim were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, according to their understanding of it. See, that's where people will read this, and they'll say, see, he was breaking the Sabbath. No, he was breaking the Sabbath according to man's understanding of what breaks the Sabbath. There is no Sabbath commandment from Elohim himself saying, do not heal on the Sabbath. There's no commandment that says that. There's no thou shalt not heal on the Sabbath, okay? He says here, he said not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he also called Elohim his own father, making himself equal with Elohim. Now, bear in mind that we have to be careful with that word equal. He was making himself of the same substance, of the same, I don't know what the right word is. We call it a species or whatever. But he wasn't making himself equal. He makes it really clear in other places, my Father is greater than I. Okay? But yes, he was making himself of the Elohim species, so to speak, of which there are two at the moment. All right? So they're really upset about this, and therefore Yeshua responds and he says to them, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son is able to do nothing at all by himself, but only that which he sees the Father doing, because whatever he does, the Son also likewise does. This is true discipleship, sonship. The disciple or the son is observing what his Father is doing, and he says, well, if my Father's doing it, it must be right to do. And so I'm going to imitate what my Father does. By the way, we see this play out in our generations and then throughout societies where children imitate their fathers. Now, of course, the fathers, if they understood the element of discipling or the element of being imitated, would think a little bit more maybe about what they're doing, because they might actually have an awareness that they're being imitated. Then they wonder why their kids end up in the predicaments that they end up in. Well, because they watched you. Okay? You smoke, they'll smoke. You do drugs, they'll do drugs. You drink, they'll drink. You physically abuse, they'll physically abuse. You use foul language, they'll use foul language. Whatever it is, they are watching you and going to imitate you. They're also imitating others as well. But do you take the weight? See, remember, honor in the Hebrew, kavod, has the idea of weight or heaviness. Do you take upon yourself and understand the weight of that responsibility? The heaviness of the burden of responsibility of being an example to those who are observing you. You know, you guys all put your seat on. But do you think about what you're doing while you're wearing them? Because after all, you're declaring outwardly what you are. You wear your MTY shirts, you claim to be Messianic, Torah observant in Israel, but do you think about what you do, what you're wearing the shirts, and you're declaring what you declare to be? You've told all the people at work, you told all your friends, but then they watch you, and they see leaven. We're going to get to that from around Passover. What's the leaven we talk about all the time? Hypocrisy. And guess what hypocrisy is? Probably the greatest source of bringing shame. There is no honor in hypocrisy. That is a shameful state of being in the state of hypocrisy, being a hypocrite. Because you're claiming one thing and you're actually something else. Your mouth says this, but your actions say that. You know, we're going to get to a verse eventually quoted out of Isaiah. We're not going to get there probably today, where it says, you know, they praise me, they honor me with their lips, but their actions, they're hypocrites. Their actions are far from me. Yeshua's going to quote that. We're going to see others quote that. And yet, this is the state of shame that the body finds itself in, that people that are in the body find themselves in. Hypocrisy is very much a shame state. Okay? So here we are back here in the verse. So they're looking to kill him. He says, look, I don't know why you're mad at me. He says, I only. He says, the Son is able to do nothing at all of himself. I am in such complete lockstep echadness with my Father, oneness with my Father, that I am not able to do anything of myself. I only do what I've seen him do. I only say what I've seen him say. I'm completely submissive to his authority. I don't have the thought of saying, hey, I think I have a better way. Why don't I just go off and do this? Nope. He knows his Father's always right. Therefore, if I do what my Father does, I'll always be right. So he only does what his Father does. Wouldn't it be great if the fathers today could be that way and their children could do the same thing? If the children could know, you fathers, that you're always right, and that if they don't see you doing it, they shouldn't do it. If they see you doing it, they can have complete confidence that it's right. Same thing with you mothers and the daughters all watching you. How great would that be? There's a weightiness or a heavy burden. But you know what? Why'd you have children then? Oh, because I never even thought about those things. That's why, because we don't think of those things. We just think, hey, how great it will be because I want kids for me. Because I think it'd be great to have kids. They're so cute and adorable, and I want a kid, and I want to love on a kid, and I want to take care of a kid. But are you thinking about all the responsibility that you have? Not just shelter and clothing and food, but you must set the example to that child. And they need to find a way to trust and respect you enough to say, my father, my mother is the example I need to follow, not the YouTuber or the social person that they interact with at school or in the neighborhood or whatever. See, but they don't because you don't. You haven't conveyed that. You know, for a child, and this is the kind of thing that can come up. You know, a child may say things like, you know what? I need to listen to my father because he's always right. Now you might think that's a dumb statement because human beings are not always right. But your child should think that, and you should strive for that. Your child should totally be able to trust you and think that you're always right. And even if you're not, that if you're not, you'll fix it. But do we own that? Do we strive for that? Or the children looking at you, scratching their heads like, I wonder when my parents are going to figure this out and start acting like, congruent, covenanted people and not, all over the map hypocrites. It's not a small burden. But Yeshua, he had the perfect father, and he chose to be the perfect son. I can do nothing of myself, But only that which they said the Son can do nothing of himself, but only that which he sees the Father doing, because whatever he does, the Son also likewise does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself does, and greater works than these he's going to show him in order that you marvel. So Yeshua is doing miracles because he's seen the Father do them. He's saying things he says because he's heard the Father say them. Everything is about the Father. So what he's basically just said was, the Father does these things on Shabbat, so I'm doing them on Shabbat. Miracles happen on Shabbat. I wonder if these leadership people here are aware that the going around Jericho, one of those days was Shabbat. After all, they went around for how many days? 7. So one of them was Shabbat. And they marched around a city. Seems like a lot of work. So what is it that you're supposed to do on Shabbat? What Yahweh tells you to do. During certain eras, it meant going to the temple and offering sacrifices. There were absolutely sacrifices to be done on Shabbat. The temple was busy on Shabbat. The priesthood was busy on Shabbat doing the things that were commanded to do on Shabbat. Holy days, the same thing. Different temple services, different sacrifices that were required for holy days. Holy day fell on Shabbat, they had to do both. He says, for the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself does. Make sure your children see you doing the good things, are aware of your choices and your submissions, because they're going to be aware of you listening. They're going to hear you on the phone griping about the struggles you have with Torah observance, griping about how the Torah is becoming a challenge for you because it's interfering with either your enjoyment or your work or some other thing. You don't think they hear those conversations? Just like you don't think they're hearing the conversations when the latest and greatest world-ending thing, whether it's the blood moons or, an asteroid's going to hit us, whatever it is, and they hear you freaking out about it, you don't think they hear all that stuff? And everybody's all talking about how, we're not going to make it through September 23rd, they keep talking about every year, how the world's going to end. Oh, wow, we got past it again, and we're still all here. Shocking. Okay? We got past all the blood moons. Again, shocking. And all of the dates they gave for the blood moons, we're going to go through 16 and 17. We're already into 19, going into 20. Well, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new theory. We're going to read some verses eventually in this teaching where Abba does what he does to show everybody just how dumb we are, thinking we're so smart and thinking that we can figure everything out. So we have to be aware the children are paying attention. You don't think they are, but they are. All you guys who are fighting, husbands and wives, you don't think they see that and it doesn't affect them? Of course you're not thinking about that. You're too selfishly in the fight. And that's a blame on both of you, because one of you is going to go home and tell the other one, see, I told you. No, both of you did it. You fought in front of the children. It took 2 of you. Don't either one of you point the finger and start a new fight. They're watching. What are they learning watching us? Are they learning loving? Are they learning how great a marriage can be? Are they learning about parenting in a right way? Are they learning about Torah walk, about covenant, about community? They're watching you do all aspects of life. And Yeshua said, I learned everything I learned by watching my Father. And so here he goes. He says he's going to give me even more stuff to do in order that you marvel. And so what he's saying is, you think this is bad, you're going to be losing even more honor, and there's more going in my direction because more people are going to marvel because more things are going to happen, and you just better figure that out. See, what made John, as in the Baptist, John, Yochanan Hamatbil, the immerser, made him so special? He said, you guys need to understand, I need to diminish in the public accolades, etc. Not that he's going to become shameful, but I just don't need as much honor. The honor needs to go to Yeshua. I've done my job. I got you to this point. And not only am I okay with it, I'm going to get mad at you if you don't transfer that over. He says, stop coming to me, go to him. Yeshua's doing more or less the same thing. He says, look, I've got your attention now, great. Now let me redirect your attention upward to the Father. Because the church has gotten stuck worshiping the Son. And they really don't focus on the Father like they should. Yeshua did what he did so he'd get your attention. And so rightly so. And is he worthy of honor and praise? Absolutely. He said, now that I've got your attention and you're giving me honor and praise, let me redirect that in the right place. I'm going to redirect it upward. We can all do that. I receive at times honor and praise because of the teachings and stuff, and I appreciate that. And then I say, great, now let's redirect that up. Okay? I deserve a certain amount of it for doing my part. If I didn't do my part, I wouldn't deserve anything. But then I can take that and say, okay, now recognize where my ability to do it comes from. Let's redirect it. So I'm not going to deflect it. I'm going to receive it and then help you redirect it. Yeshua doesn't deflect it. He says, hey, that's great. Now let me redirect it. Now there was one time when they called him good, and he says, why are you calling me good? And I think at that point, they were confused on some things, and he needed to really kind of give them a little bit of a smack just to say, hold on, I've been redirecting, but you still haven't gotten the point. I want you to focus higher. And they were just not getting it, right? Because it's hard for us to see the invisible when we can see the visible. Yeshua was right there. He's doing all these amazing things. So all the honor was going in his direction. And he's, even right here, the miracle of healing the person, he said, hey, hold on. Yes, I healed him. He never denies it. He says, but that's not about me. I'm just doing what my Father does. This is about him. He says, verse 21, for as the Father raises the dead and makes alive, even so the Son makes alive whom he wishes. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. Now listen, this is all for this purpose in verse 23. And the word there is the same word that should be translated honor. It says that all should honor or value the Son, even as they honor the Father. He who does not value the Son does not value the Father who sent him. Now, don't read this in the reverse. He's not saying, I should be honored as the Father. He's saying, no, I should be honored because I'm doing what the Father is. In other words, redirecting it again. He says, if you don't value the Son, you're not valuing the Father, because the only reason I'm of any value is because of the Father. So you should value the Son as you value the Father, because you have to recognize that any value the Son has is because it comes from the Father. And so the same thing with the teacher. You should value me as your teacher, but only as you value Yeshua and the Father, because anything that I have of any use comes from them or it's of no use. You see how that redirection goes? But yes, it's still appropriate to value the Son. He says, look, you should. He said, all this is done that you should value the Son. Why should you value the Son? Because he's doing impressive miracles? No, he says because the Father has given him these things. He says because the Father has given him judgment. The Father's given him the ability to make alive whom he wishes. The Father has given him these things. It's all about the Father. Why do you value a teacher? Because the Father's given the teacher an ability to give you information. Not because the teacher is so great. Don't make it about the teacher. Verse 24, truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me. Notice how he's trying to give you this now. He's just said that the Son can raise and give life to whom he chooses, but he also said in order to give life, there's a judgment, and that the Father has given the Son the authority to do the judging. Okay, he will come to do judgment when he comes. But he also says, look, he who hears my word and believes in me. No, he doesn't say that. And believes in him who sent me. Because in believing in him who sent me means you believe that that word came from him who sent me. Now you have to understand this him who sent me thing takes us back to that time frame. Even, Middle Ages still had this quite a little bit, even like 1,000 years later or so, 1,500 years later. The idea of the vassal or the one who was sent, representing the one who did the sending. So when a guy came into town who represented the king or represented the emperor, you treated him like it was the king or the emperor himself, because he bore the full weight and authority of the one he represented. By the way, this is why Egypt gets basically condemned to destruction, because a threat, a life threat, a murder threat was made to the vassal of the king. Moses was told, you show your face one more time, I'm going to kill you. You don't threaten the vassal, because you threaten the vassal, you're threatening the king himself. Pharaoh was threatening Yahweh. You don't threaten his representative. So here Yeshua is making the point. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word, he said earlier, I only say what the Father says, I only do what he says to do. So if you're hearing his word, you're hearing the Father's word. So you must believe. He's trying to make that connection, and this is a real hard time. This is the really difficult thing for the Jewish community at this point, to make the connection that there's a father and a son. Because they're saying, I don't understand. We've always had the Father. He says, no, you've always had me. I'm trying to point to you and show you the Father. He says, so truly I say to you, he who hears my word but believes in him who sent me, in other words, believing that he gave me the words, not just believing that he exists. See, that's a big problem in Christianity. It's all about believing things exist. Okay, so you believe it exists, but if you don't act upon it, I mean, I can hand you something and tell you it's poison, and you can believe it's poison, and then you don't act upon it, you still eat it anyway. You understood that what it was, and you accepted that reality. So just believing that the Father exists, but not walking and living a life that represents that reality, that you've actually accepted that reality. This is the challenge. He goes, you have to believe in him who sent me. He says, if you do that, he says, then you will possess everlasting life and not come into judgment, but then you will have passed from death into life. Now we're going to have a little bit of a play on here between the idea of death and life, okay? Passing from death into life. Who are the dead hearing his voice? And we're going to compare that as we get to verse 28 and 29, where it talks about things, again, about hearing his voice and those that are to be resurrected. So let me read a few more verses, then we're going to come back and unwind this death-life thing. So he says here in 24, if you hear his word and believe in him who sent me, you'll possess everlasting life, not come into judgment, and you will have passed from death into life. Truly, truly, I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of Elohim. Again, this idea of the dead hearing the voice, and those having heard shall live. For as the Father possesses life in himself, so he also gave the Son to possess life in himself. And he has given him authority also to do judgment, because he is the son of Adam. Now that line there is just simply to say, look, Yeshua is qualified to do judgment because he's put on a flesh suit and he knows what it's like to be us. So he understands. You can't say, like to the Father, well, listen, you're Elohim. You don't understand what it's like to have all this junk, feelings, emotions, pain, suffering, ailments, and all this other stuff. And Yeshua can say, yes, I do. Spent 30 plus years in one of those. Know exactly what it's about. Okay? So he's qualified. He says, do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming in which all those in the tomb shall hear his voice, and shall come forth those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have practiced evil to a resurrection of judgment. So there's two different things happening here between 24 and 29. Let me kind of clarify that a little bit for you. So the dead that we're first talking to about are not actually physically dead. Ephesians 2 tells us we were dead in our trespasses. Without being connected to what brings life, you are essentially dead. You're just walking dead. You're still breathing, you're alive, but you're not alive. Because you don't have real life, you just have physical life. So he's saying if you hear, then you have passed from death into the potential for life. Because we know that his word is the words of life. We have those that when he's talking to his apostles, they say, why would we ever leave you? Your words are life. These things are connected piece upon piece, line upon line, okay? So he's saying here, truly I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me possesses everlasting life. And now possesses doesn't mean that you're actually going to live forever, okay? Possesses means that you own and have the potential for everlasting life, all right? So let's just keep that in mind. Give me 1 second. See if I can find it real quick, if I can go to it. Nope. Okay, couldn't find it. Okay, so let's kind of play this through. I did quote it anyway, the verse where Yeshua talks about how the apostles, one of his disciples has said, you have the words of life. All right, now, as we talk about that, so he's saying here that you're going to pass from death into life. That's not yet what we're talking about in 28 and 29. In 28 and 29, he says, don't marvel at this. The hour is coming. Now, in the previous verses, it talks about how this is now also in verse 25. Truly I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is when the dead shall hear the voice. So now even is when dead are hearing the voice, but then there will be a time in verse 28 when there's going to be a resurrection. And those who are in the tombs shall hear his voice. Different death we're talking about here. There's the walking dead, and then there's the buried dead, okay? The breathing dead and the not breathing dead. But he's trying to tell you that you, while breathing, can make a choice to pass from death into life so that you will be effectively in the right place when we get to verse 28. Because he says there will be a judgment, there'll be a resurrection. He says, and in that resurrection, those who have done good. That sounds like works. Those who have done good. So what defines good? Hebrew word there is tov. Yeshua says there is none good but one. So that means that what is good is only those things that are of the Father. What he decides, what he defines as good. If you want a more in-depth study on that, go listen to the Well Done, Good and Trustworthy Servant, where part 1 is about defining the word good. Okay? Okay, we might have to redo that teaching here in a little bit. Okay, but that's very important that we go ahead and do that. Now, he says, the hour is coming, and now is when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of Elohim, and those having heard shall live. So he's trying to let you understand that there is something that has to do with honor and shame that we must be very aware of, which is the transference. Okay, you can transfer honor or shame. In other words, you can bring honor or give honor, or you can share or bring shame. And so what he's saying is that the Father possesses life, but he also gave the Son the ability to possess life in himself as well, so that he can then give. The Father gives life, the Son can give life, because he possesses it. It's his to give and do what he wants with. But he also says that you as a human being, when you pass, he says, if you have my word and believe in him who sent me, you possess everlasting life. But you don't necessarily always keep everything you possess, do you? You can lose a possession. You can give away a possession. You can destroy it, waste it, squander it. There's a million things you can do with a possession. And so he's trying to make sure that you understand that it's still connected to hearing his voice. You may want to go to the Father and Son teaching starting in around part 6 or so and listen to the part that says, my sheep hear my voice or know my voice, and deal with the idea of the voice. Okay, might do a teaching at some point. We'll call it Yeshua, the voice of Yahweh, or the voice of the Father, or something like that. It'd be a good title for something, I think. All right, he says, but don't marvel at all this. The hour is coming, though, when those in the tombs. Now, why would he say tombs? He's already mentioned the dead more than once, because now he's talking about a different state of dead. There's the walking, talking, living dead that we sort of were when he said you are dead in your trespasses. Paul tells us that. And then those who are literally in the ground. They're not breathing. They're not alive physically. And he's saying the hour is coming when those in the ground shall hear his voice, and shall come forth those who have done good to resurrection of life, and those who practice evil to a resurrection of judgment. Okay, so this is really critical as we compare those two. Is that clear so far? All right? Now, So he's trying to tell them again is this transference of honor. I see my Father doing what he does. I do what he does. It brings me a certain level of honor. You're jealous. You want to kill me, he says, but you're missing the point. He says, I can also transfer honor back to you if you hear my voice and you also believe in him who sent me. I mean, that's sort of a deep interpretation, but I don't think it's very deep. He's saying, I can transfer that to you, and you can receive honor by imitating me. That's what he's saying. He says, imitate me. Paul says the same thing to his students. Imitate me as I imitate Messiah, who's imitating the Father, and we all can receive honor. Verse 30. How far do I want to go in this? Okay. Verse 30, of myself I am unable to do any matter. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own desire, but the desire of the Father who sent me. Okay, so let this be a real strong and hard lesson for everyone out there. Listen to what he is saying, because a lot of you struggle with filtering through your own desire. He says, of myself, I'm able to not to do anything. I'm not able to do anything. Now, he's specifically talking about here judgment, but he's talking about any matter. But it's specifically in the context of there will be the resurrection of life and those who practice evil to a judgment, a resurrection of judgment. He said, of myself, I'm not able to do any. Now, the word matter is put in there. It could be any judgment because that's what he's talking about here. So let's be careful about that word in italics in your Bible. It's added. He says, of myself, I'm unable to do any judgment. Let's leave it as judgment because that's what he's talking about. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is righteous because I'm not seeking my own desire in the matter, my preference of what I think is right and wrong and everything else, but the desire of the Father who sent me. See, you are all out there sitting on those little judgment chairs, judging each other through your own desires and your own filters of right and wrong, etc. You may even convince yourself that what you're doing is the Father's desire, that it's in line with the Father's desire, but are you even capable of actually seeing that clearly because you're so emotionally charged? Okay? You need to answer those questions before you try to judge anything. Of course, Yeshua tells us straight out, judge not. I don't know why so many people struggle with that very simplistic negative commandment. Judge not. Yet we do this all day long. Well, I don't think so-and-so should be doing this. And I think, can you believe so-and-so is doing that? You're judging them. You know what kind of an awful person that person is? You know what an awful person is? That person sitting, that person. Why are you judging? All you should do is observe and allow yourself to make a judgment call of whether or not it's something you should be doing or involved in. Anything beyond that is judging. Everybody gets confused when I talk about this stuff. Judgment and judging are two completely different things. Judgment is using discernment to decide if what I'm observing is something that I should be doing or involved with. Judging is ascribing motive to the ones doing whatever I'm observing. Okay? Or ascribing a moralistic right-wrong measurement to it. All you need to do is say, I'm observing, and make a discerning judgment if you should be doing likewise of what you're observing, or should you not be involved. That's judgment. Yes, please be discerning and use judgment. You're seeing something going on. You're looking at it and going, that doesn't look like something I probably need to be involved in. Good, don't be involved in it. But don't take the next step going, oh, can you believe so-and-so is doing that? And can you look what they're doing? Don't they know that's wrong? Blah, blah. Now you've jumped into judging. And then you're going to do worse. You're going to do Lashon Hara because you're going to call up your friends and start telling them about it. Do you know what I saw today? You know what I saw so-and-so doing? Do you know what so-and-so said? Do you know what so-and-so did? These are shameful behaviors. You're not bringing any honor on anybody, especially not yourself. Oh, but they're the ones doing the shameful thing. Maybe. Why add your shame to their shame? Because that's all you're doing. Use judgment. What is judgment again? I'm going to say it third, fourth time now. You're observing something. Something comes into your experience. You see it, you hear it, you're made known about something. Discernment and judgment is what you do with that information in deciding the level of involvement you should have with it or not. Participation. By involvement, I mean participation. I'm not talking about correcting it or not or whatever, but should you be participating with whatever it is you're now aware of? If the answer is yes, fine. If the answer is no, don't. But when you see it's a don't, we tend to judge, because now we're looking at them as, well, I can't believe so-and-so is doing that, or they said that, or they did this. Oh, how shameful. Now you're judging them. Remember, there's one who's judging you. Judge not lest you be judged. Are you so perfect? Do you not have your moments? Just because you're maybe better at hiding them and not being as public about them, does it make it any less shameful? Nothing is hidden. Your Father sees it all. Yes, no. Right? He sees it all. So again, absolutely judgment, no judging. So Yeshua is saying, look, I'm able to do this because I don't seek my own desire. That's where you fail. I want justice and I want it now. That person should be punished. That person should be embarrassed. That person should be kicked out of the group. That person should be, you have this, anything in your mind is that person should be, you're now judging. That person should be. If you have any thought that goes along that line, that's a thought that needs to stop. Well, that person should be, somebody needs to stop them. Somebody should make that, be careful with all that. You may want to bring that information to someone who does have better discernment and a responsibility and say, I don't want to judge this thing, but this is information, just the observation that you may need to be aware of. And that's not necessarily Lashon Hara. If you bring it only to a person who has a responsibility to take that information, because it may be important to know, because it may be something that was toxic in the body that needs to be addressed. In other words, it may be contagious. Of course, you could be contagious too when you start doing Lashon Hara. Because you could get out there and post it and say something or talk to somebody, and now you're spreading it. You may be worse contagious than the person you observed. Okay, so you may want to now unemotionally just share the information. Look, this is what I saw. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not judging it. I'm not labeling it. Okay, that's where judging comes in. You're now labeling it. Right, wrong, awful, sin, embarrassing, horrible. You're labeling things. You're in a judge. You're using a label. You're saying guilty, not guilty. That's a judge decision. I see people doing something. I have no idea why they're doing it. I can just use discernment to decide whether I should be doing it. Now, if I decide I shouldn't, I have no idea why they're doing it, and I should not be trying to figure that out necessarily. That's between him and them and whatever. Now, leadership might need to know about it, so you can bring it there and say, look, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble. I saw something that I didn't feel comfortable with, and I don't want to judge it, so I just want to bring it to your attention so that you could decide if something needs to be done about it. Once you hand it to leadership, you let it go. Oh, but leadership did nothing about it. No, they made a choice. You need to be okay with that. But they didn't do what I want them to do. Oh, wait a minute, it says here, my desire I don't seek, but the desire of the Father. In other words, because my desire is not involved, whatever the Father decides that's what we're going to do, because it doesn't matter if I agree with him or not. That's where true submission comes in, right? But I don't like the decision he made. Well, isn't that fun? It's not really relevant, is it, though? It's not your decision. So why do you care what the decision is? What you may want to do is figure out what's going on in you that has you upset about the decision you just saw. Why is it bothering you? I've had to say that to people a lot lately. Lately meaning last month or so, where something came up, I handled it a certain way or whatever, and then they had something going on. I could see it all over their face. And I look at them and I say, whatever that was, that needs to be fixed. And they look at me like, what? this isn't about me. I just brought this other thing to you. I said, yeah, but you didn't like the way I handled it. And whatever just happened in your face, in your being, that's why this just happened. Because it brought out that, and that needs to be dealt with. Whatever you just brought out, that negative emotional space. And so it was allowed to happen partially so that would be dealt with. Okay? And so this is not easy, this thing called life. This fleshly life. It'll be easy when we get the real life. But in this one, we've got all kinds of emotional stuff. We have to deal with the ego, the I don't like, the I prefer, the why not, why this, why are you letting them do that? Why don't you make them stop? Why? Oh, goodness. Why? You're still seeking your own desire. This is wrecking all relationships that you're in. Husbands, wives, parents and children, members in leadership and ministry, workers and co-workers. People don't understand how to get their emotions out of the way and understand their proper role. Okay, Yeshua completely understood how to be in the middle, completely submissive to his Father, completely owning his responsibility to those that he set an example for. Perfect leadership. Completely submissive on one level, completely owning the burden of the heaviness of the responsibility in the other direction. That is what you signed on for. I almost was going to say men, because we've got to own that first. Men, do you want to take on yourself the heaviness of your role? Men. But if you're acting all emotionally charged and seeking only your desire and all this, and you're out of control, how do you expect anything else to be in control? Oh, I own that t-shirt, believe me. But we got to struggle with that, and we need to overcome it and finally get that thing settled. Otherwise, how can we lead? You got to stop seeking your own desire. In verse 31, he says, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. You have sent Yochanan, and he bore witness of the truth. So he's pointing to Yochanan the Immerser. He says, but I do not receive witness from man, but I say this in order that you might be saved or delivered out of what? Not saved again ultimately, but delivered out of all of this wrong thinking. Delivered out of death into life, fleshly side, the beginnings of it, which is a wrong thinking process. How do you go from death into life? You change the thinking. And then from the thinking, the heart changes. Remember the whole heart of the matter flow of as we think, it then goes in the heart, emotions get attached, and then eventually something comes out in an action. Actions repeated become a habit. Habits lead to a destiny. He said, I'm trying to deliver you out of wrong thinking. You need to have an ability to what? He says, hear my word and believe in him who sent me. He says, I don't receive witness from man, but I say this in order that you might be delivered. He was, now he's trying to use John as the example. He says, he was the burning and shining lamp. And for a while you wished to rejoice in his light. You honored him. You gave him praise and honor. You looked to him as the light. But I have a greater witness than that of Yochanan. For the works that the Father gave me to accomplish, the works that I do, bear witness of me that the Father has sent me. And the Father who sent me, he bore witness of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time nor seen his form. We cover that in the beginning of the Father, the Son teaching, okay, what that whole verse is all about. So he's trying to say, look, you guys think you have a relationship with the Father, but you don't. I came here to explain that there's a whole nother level to this thing that you've never understood. You don't understand who it was at Mount Sinai. You don't understand who it was with Abraham, with the sending him out of the land to go to begin the journey, or telling him to go and offer up his son. You don't know the experience that I had with Isaac and then with Jacob. You don't know what happened with Noah. You don't know who that was and how that all played through. So I'm here to explain all that to you. He says, and you do not have his word staying in you because you do not believe in him whom he sent. Now again, isn't that the problem they had with the Yahweh of the Old Testament all the way through? Did they believe Yahweh? No. Did they listen to Yahweh? Not very much. For short periods of time, a little bit. He's saying, you didn't believe in me in that form. You don't believe in me now. You're not receiving me now any more than you received me then. You search the scriptures because you think you possess everlasting life in them. And these are the ones that bear witness of me. So now he's connecting and he says, look, you're reading. This is where I tell you the Yahweh of the Old Testament, 99% of the time that you're hearing is the Son, not the Father. The Father's not been on this planet interacting with sin and death and flesh. That's the Son's role. Okay? He said, these are the ones that bear witness of me, but you don't desire to come to me in order to possess life. What is Yeshua? In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim, and the Word is by which everything came to be that came to be, and not a single thing came to be except by and through him. He says, you don't want to come to me in order to possess life. You don't want to come to the truth. You don't want to come to the Word. You don't want to come to the Torah. You don't want to come to me in any of my forms. You don't want to come to the light. We're going to do teaching on light and darkness at some point. You don't want to come to any of that. See, that's the shame that you bear. The honorable thing would be to come to me. That's giving me honor, and then I can give you honor back. Okay, honor and shame have a flow to them. He says, now we get to verse 41. After all of that, he goes, I don't receive esteem from men. I'm not here to receive esteem from men. Now, when he says I don't receive it, it doesn't mean that when you go to him and say, I praise you, I appreciate you, that he says, nope, I don't receive it. He's saying, that's not why I'm here. He said, I'm here to receive esteem from my Father. In other words, that's what I'm seeking. He says, I didn't come here to seek esteem from men. He says, but I know you, that you do not have the love of Elohim in you. I have come in my Father's authority, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own authority, him you would receive. Now we'll put the word name back in there. I've come in my Father's name, reputation, his honor, his esteem, and you don't receive me. But if another one comes in his own name, reputation, esteem, etc., him you'd receive. How are you able to believe when you are receiving esteem from one another? And the esteem that is from the only Elohim you do not seek. Let's put the word honor in there. How are you able to believe when you are receiving honor from one another? Because after all, that's what you're seeking. If you're getting it from each other, why would you seek it from anywhere else? So, you're sitting around going, but everybody thinks I'm great. Everybody tells me I'm doing good. Okay, well, then you've elevated the people that you're receiving from to a really improper place. He says, when you're doing this problem of receiving from one another, he says, the esteem of the only one, the only Elohim, that one you don't seek honor from. Well, my mother told me I was right. My brother told me I was right. My best friend told me I was right. And then you argue with me. Okay, well then you don't believe he sent me either, apparently, because you're going to argue with me that these people, then fine, go study under them. After all, why you come and argue with me? Well, they said. Well, then go to them. Why you bother me? If you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. I don't care if anybody listens to me or not. I'm not going to argue with you about it, though. Because I don't receive my esteem from you. That doesn't mean I'm not seeking it. Some people out there saying, well, Rabbi just wants everybody to think he's the best guy, blah, blah. You know what? If you knew me, I really don't care. Talk to the people that know me best, the people that are here every day. They will tell you don't understand. He really doesn't care. Okay? Ask Manny, ask Stacia, ask David, ask my wife, ask the people that work here. I'm not about that. All right? It's all about, I'm trying to help you get in line with him. And if you have no interest in doing that with my help, then fine, go do it somewhere other way. It will not hurt my feelings. Okay, my feelings aren't out there on the floor needing a feelings bag. Okay? They're not getting stepped on by anybody. And I've got people that contact me on a regular enough basis thinking they stepped on my feelings and they're all apologetic, and I appreciate the apology, but you have to understand, I probably didn't have any feelings get stepped on. I probably just noticed that you were rude or disrespectful, whatever it was, and just wrote it off as, oh, well, that was, they're going to have to work on that. Okay? He says, but you, because you're receiving esteem or honor from one another, you're not seeking it. Why would you seek it if you're already getting what you want? So then you're not going to seek it because you're busy already getting what you want. So why else would you seek it? He says, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. He says, there is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you've set your expectation. Look, you've set your expectation on the writings of Moses. He says that Moses accuses you. Why? Because Moses told you, do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. And it's not Moses telling you, it's the Father, or actually in this case it's Yeshua himself talking through Moses. He says, why should I accuse you? I already gave the words to Moses. I'm already accusing you. I'm not going to accuse you. He says, because if you had believed Moses, if you had believed Moshe, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. Now, people think, oh, you mean that one place in Deuteronomy when he says, a prophet like unto me, blah, 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 blah? No. He wrote everywhere where he said, thus said Yahweh, he wrote about Yeshua. He wrote about me. He said, but you didn't believe Moses, because if you had, you would have believed me, since he wrote about me. But if you do not believe his writings, how are you going to believe my words? Because they're the same. Oh, those red letter Bibles are always cool in the 70s. That was like a big deal, 70s and 80s, the red letter Bibles, fine. All that New Testament stuff where Yeshua speaking is all in red letters. Go back and all the thus said Yahweh's, make them red too. Now your Bible's correct. Well, I just got to do the words of Jesus. That's what people will say. Well, guess what? Yeshua said everything that he says here in the Brit and all the Yahweh stuff in the Tanakh. Make it all red. All those thus said Yahwehs that you see a prophet saying, Moses saying, whoever, make it red. He says, but you know what? You don't believe Moshe. Now, that being said, what's the first thing we're going to do when he dies and is resurrected? We're going to decide that Moshe was not necessary and we don't need to believe Moshe, and we'll just throw him out. Because that totally makes sense for us to do. And this is what the mainstream does. It decides, well, no, we don't need Moshe. And he's saying, look, if you had believed Moshe, you would believe me. Moses wrote about me. So if he wrote about Yeshua, if we're going to believe Yeshua here in John 5, if Moses wrote about Yeshua, wow, how could that mean that the stuff that Moses said is bad, wrong, and awful? How do we turn it into the horrible, brutal laws that were against us and this terrible stuff that causes us to sin and everything else? When he says Moses was writing about me. He doesn't say in that one little verse Moses wrote about me, because quite frankly, Yeshua is very good about quoting verses. And he quotes plenty of them out of the prophets, out of Moses, wherever. He quotes plenty of verses. He doesn't quote a single verse here. He just says Moses, in general, wrote about me. When Moses wrote, guess what he was writing about? Me. Moses wrote the 5 books. Oh, so when Moses started in Genesis, he was writing about Yeshua. We're not just talking about from when Moses started out in Exodus, when he was born. He says, Moses wrote about me. He wrote the whole first 5 books, the Chumash. Oh, so all the way back to Genesis, he wrote about Yeshua. So now we're not just talking about one verse. And he's saying, but you didn't give honor. You brought shame. You didn't honor Moses. Moses, your hero. Moses, whose writings you look to for eternal life. Moses, who wrote these things. Oh, him you honor, etc., on such a high level. But you don't even recognize that, like me, I'm pointing to the Father. Moses also wasn't about Moses. He was pointing to me. That's what Yeshua was saying. But you honor Moses, who's pointing to somebody else, but me you won't honor, knowing that it's the same thing. But you honor Moses. Moses says, he says, Moses, he says, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There's one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you set your expectation. Your whole future is based on understanding Moses, his writings. The Jewish community today, same thing, right? The core foundation of all their beliefs is the first 5 books, the Chumash. And so, after all, he says, look, those things that Moses wrote are about me. And then Moses is writing about Yeshua, and Yeshua is now saying, and everything that was about me was really so that I can redirect it to him, to the Father. Now you see the whole picture, he's saying. Now you can understand. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Father, we come before you, and Father, this whole thing is just, we're starting to recognize the weight of it. Kavod, the heaviness, the honor and the weight, the responsibility that we have to understand what brings honor and shame, to be seeking properly after what brings honor, and to be seeking to avoid that which brings shame, not just to ourselves and to others, but most importantly, to you. Father, help us to truly embrace the fullness of the example set by Yeshua for us, so that we can truly understand, if we're to imitate him, to imitate the fullness in his submissiveness to you and the fullness that he embraced his responsibility to be an example to those following him. And let us all embrace that in our lives also. So that truly, Father, that we can believe and hear and receive his words, so that truly we can then also believe in you who sent him and move from death into life. And so, Father, we thank you for giving us a vehicle, a means to pass from death into life. And help us to not squander that, but yet that we understand that we possess the potential, we possess the opportunity, we possess the means to have life. May we not squander it or take it lightly or take it for granted, but embrace it fully and to live in it and walk in it fully. So, Father, we just want to thank you. We love you so much and appreciate all that you've done and all that you're doing in our lives, and that we appreciate that you gave us the word in not only in the flesh and the word that's of life that is now sitting at your right hand, but that you allowed it to be written down for our admonition so we could have it, to study it, to embrace it, to live it, to walk it. So, Father, we thank you. We praise you and we give you all glory and honor. And hopefully we're bringing you honor and not shame. In the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen.